Hello everyone! So, today is Throwback Thursday. For those of you that don't know, I am now posting 5 to 7 videos a week, and Monday through Friday has themed days. So, Thursdays are Throwback Thursdays, and what that is going to be, it's going to be either one of two things that day. I'm either going to tell old stories, old fishing stories, or I'm going to go back to like old videos when I first started, because I've had a YouTube channel for years and never really did much on it. Never really cared, and just kind of posted whenever, and didn't. I was only making videos just because I was recording myself fishing anyway. But and yeah, and never really talked about it, so it's kind of funny to go back and look at them, and I'll tell kind of behind the scenes things on it and whatever, and tell fishing stories, like I said. And I might actually just kind of go through my life, and I'm 33 now, and I've lived a bunch of different lives. Actually, I've done a lot of weird crap. Some of it, actually, a lot of it over the last 20 years, where I'm going to start here. I didn't even fish, actually. So yeah, I'm probably just gonna make videos every week until I get through my life. People like hearing about that sort of stuff, and I don't know, it's kind of funny and pretty crazy. I got a lot of weird stuff that I used to do in my life. So anyway, let's start with, and I figured this would be the best place to start with these videos, was to go back to the first bass that I caught, which did not really get me addicted to bass fishing, or really fishing in general, but it was still the first bass that I caught. So that happened years later, the addiction into this bass fishing thing. But so let's start all the way back. I'll just give you a quick rundown. So I actually grew up, I was born and raised in Washington State, Eastern Washington, and I actually grew up where I was born, and then grew up for a few years, but then moved shortly thereafter. But anyway, I actually was born and grew up for my first few years that I don't really remember too much in the desert. There is a desert in Washington. Kind of a desert. It's really, actually, a lot of it kind of looks like Colorado, to be honest. There's not, like everyone thinks when they think about Washington State, they think about the big trees and the rain all the time. Yeah, that's Western Washington. I grew up on Eastern Washington, the other side of the mountain, we call it. And that's actually where I grew up, and where pretty much all my family has lived all their lives, Idaho and Washington. So that's where I grew up, and that's where my parents pretty much grew up and all that. So my dad was really into fishing in general, warm water species. He had like a little John boat that he would just throw in the back of the truck, and bass fish, catfish, whatever, but always really liked bass. And they would do that all the time. Before I was born, his life before that, and then even years after I was born. But lived there for a while, and then we moved more to Eastern Washington, northeast, sort of, to where it's more colder climates and the bigger trees, kind of Idaho. We were literally right on the Idaho border. And he kind of didn't fish for those few years there. That was when I was like 7, I think, 6, 7, and I remember a lot of that growing up. That area, that was fun. Riding 4-wheelers all the time and doing weird stuff like that. Lived out in the middle of nowhere, and I enjoyed that. Still thinking about that stuff. And but yeah, anyway, when I was like 12, moved here to Colorado. My dad got a job here, and we moved here in the summer. And then, yeah, I was a little bit before 12, or I was 12. I don't remember exactly the age. I still don't remember exactly what year I moved here. But anyway, so we moved here, and I think my dad was under the assumption, just like most people are when they move to Colorado, they think it's all trout fishing, and which there are amazing trout fisheries here, and trout fishing is awesome here and all that stuff. But I think he thought that's pretty much all that was here and stuff, and as most people do. And that's kind of a reason why I started even filming videos years ago, was to be like, hey, there's actually bass here, and I love fishing for them. But anyway, so around that time we started, my dad started getting into fly fishing and getting waders and getting fly rods and going up into the mountains and fly fishing, and kind of got me into it a little bit when I was about 12, 13. And it was fun, but that's really all I did. And then we'd go bait dunking for trout and everything. And I remember once I was 13, maybe even 14. It was around that time, almost 14, whatever. I think it was the summer before I turned 14, actually. He was like, heard about this lake that had good smallmouth in it. And he was like, ooh, bass, cool. So we went out to this lake, and, you know, we didn't have a boat or anything like that. We were just bank fishing, and we were bank fishing on the dam. And I had, like I said, I started trout fishing and knowing that stuff, like, you know, salmon eggs and maybe some power bait or whatever, just throwing it out there and just hanging out. And I was 13 or whatever and didn't care that much, but, you know, was kind of getting into it and everything. And so we were out there. There was, you know, just like most lakes here in Colorado, there's trout there too, and bass and whatever. So we were out there and just like bait dunking for trout, normal day or whatever. And then he like was fishing a Senko and 4 bass, you know, he was trying that too. And I was like, what is that? And whatever. And he like tied one on for me, whatever, showed me kind of how to use it, and wasn't doing anything with it, pretty much just throwing it out there and like, yeah, just bait dunking like you do for trout with salmon eggs or whatever. I remember him catching a couple of smallies and some trout too and everything. I think we both I might have caught like 1 trout, whatever, but yeah, and him catching a smallmouth and me being like, whoa, what the hell is that? Like, that's pretty cool looking fish, you know? And they weren't big or anything, but I remember that. And I remember at some point I was like, well, I'm gonna go walk off the dam. Like, so this lake, it's pretty much a dam all on one side and then a little bit of the other side that makes kind of a U shape, goes around. It's not a huge lake, whatever, but then the other side is all real shallow for the most part, kind of grassy areas, not really a whole lot of bank fishing or stuff. But for some reason I was just like, man, I'm kind of bored, whatever, and I told him, hey, I'm gonna go head over here, and took my rod and walked down to like off the rock dam and down into kind of this little cut thing. It's really just like a jetty out point of that lake. and went in there and just like made a cast with that Senko, and just was dead sticking it. It was probably like an hour. No, it probably really wasn't. Like looking back on it, it seemed like now, you know, kind of how we work lures and everything. Even a Senko, which is kind of a dead stick bait, but you even still work it pretty good. It was probably only a couple minutes, but thinking about it, it seems like a freaking hour. Like, why was that just sitting there? But it was just sitting there. And I remember just all of a sudden my line just kind of went tight and moved. And I went to set the hook, and for some reason, because any of you that have just bait dunked for trout or whatever, you don't like rip into a trout. You pretty much just lift the rod and pull it tight. Like, you know, trouts are little sissies and their mouths are really soft, so you don't have to really set a hook into them. You do too tight, you're just going to rip it out. And I knew that growing up fishing for trout. So, but for some reason, I don't know, I just got excited or something, and I just ripped right into it with my little spinner rod. And yeah, it seemed like the biggest freaking thing ever. I remember it getting like halfway and just kind of walloping, and me thinking it was like freaking giant, thinking it was a whale or something that I hooked, and dragging it. You know, where I was, there was actually like, didn't know this at the time. I've fished this place since. I don't live that far from it, and actually never really fished it until last year for some reason after all these years. But anyway, now kind of fishing it a couple of times, I've noticed that there's a deep channel there in that spot, but the banks are like super shallow and they go out quite a ways. And but yeah, I was like in the back of it on one of those banks, and I just like pulled him up and just like dragged him onto the bank, and like he's all flopping around. I grabbed him like a weird kid, or not a weird kid, but like a little kid holding like a football. Seriously, like you see like a little kid, they don't hold it like a football or whatever, you know, they don't hold it like they're gonna pass, they don't hold it like you're really supposed to hold the football, they hold it like this, you know, like what the hell, like a 3-year-old holding the football. And that's how I grabbed this fish. I grabbed him like this, his head is up here, and I'm like holding his belly, just like, what the heck? And just thinking it was so cool. And it wasn't huge. I think about it as like maybe 3 pounds, whatever. Probably was about 3 pounds. It was decent, just kind of thinking about it. But yeah, I just remember holding it. I was like, what the heck? And I didn't really have a tight grip on him, and so he was holding, his head's here, and I was holding him like this, and he like flared out his fin when I'm holding him, and he kind of poked me a little bit, and I went, ah, and dropped him, and he flopped into the water, and I kind of like went down to try to grab him, and he just wiggled his way out and got away. But I was thinking, oh, that's so cool and everything, and I took off running to my dad that was still fishing the dam area, and told him, oh my god, I caught a smallmouth, I caught one of those bass, and blah 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 blah. And I still think probably to this day he doesn't believe me, but it was awesome. That was like the first bass that I caught, and it was a smallmouth, which is pretty funny. I later on, because that didn't, like I said, it didn't really start my addiction into bass fishing. I always kind of fished throughout my life, but I didn't really start bass fishing like full into it until my 20s. So there was years there where I wasn't like really into bass fishing, and I was doing fly fishing for trout still and stuff like that, and just kind of doing goofy little things for bass every once in a while, but wasn't super addicted to it yet. But once I got addicted to it in my 20s, I got addicted to catching largies and just largemouth fishing and doing all that stuff. So, and never fished for smallmouth up until really a couple years ago, or like actually targeting smallmouth probably not until like last year where I was like, I'm actually gonna go and try to fish for smallies. It was finally like last year. Normally I was just fishing for largemouth, and if I came across a smallie, like cool, like a stupid one that was acting like a largemouth. But it's pretty funny. That was the first bass that I caught, and yeah, it's just a weird story and kind of goofy, and I like looking back on it. And I can think about all these things and about how awesome it was and everything. But why didn't I really get addicted to the bass fishing thing or whatever? But I really didn't until many years later. But it's pretty cool. So I just kind of figured I would tell that story. Next week, I think I'll move on from there. I might just do like life stories on Thursdays for a little while and get you caught up to my real life, because I never talk about my life on this channel. None of you really know me or anything. You know me fishing, but you don't really know the weird stuff that I've done in my life. And pretty crazy times. But anyway, tomorrow will be a Funky Friday, which ain't too funky. I mean, it's nothing funky for me, but people think it's funky, and I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to go over it. Yeah, anyway. Check that one out, and I'll see you guys on the next one.